The legislative session has wrapped up in Richmond, but the biggest questions may just be beginning. How will a new law create a chilling effect on pro-life sidewalk counselors in front of abortion clinics? And when will pot shops, commercialized marijuana stores, start popping up in our neighborhoods across Virginia? Meanwhile, the battle over student free speech intensified in Albemarle County, where the nation's largest Turning Point High School chapter is pushing back against new policies that will severely restrict conservative Christian club activities on campus. We break it all down today. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with Todd Gathje, Vice President of Government Relations. Well, welcome, everyone. Glad to have you with us for Speak Up Virginia. Victoria Cobb is traveling this week, and so I'm thrilled to have with us my colleague, Dr. Todd Gathje. Yeah. Welcome, Todd.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Yeah.
Well, for those of you that pay attention to the goings on around here, you know that Todd oversees the policy efforts. He is very in tune with what's happening at the Capitol every week. So we're going to have him this week and next to kind of walk us through the outcomes of the General Assembly session, because they just wrapped up. And, you know, we'll kind of run it down for you where we're at with everything. But before we get into that, I did want to bring you the latest on this ongoing battle over student-free speech that's really intensifying in Albemarle County. Now, just to give everybody a recap, to bring you up to speed, if you haven't listened to the last couple of episodes, you know, we've been talking about that this is where the nation's largest student high school chapter for Turning Point is.
Yeah.
And they had invited Victoria Cobb, our president, out to speak during their free period. You know, the club regularly meets during a free period. I think it's around lunch during the school day, and they have outside speakers come in. And, you know, because they're supposed to be discussing the conservative Christian viewpoint that their club represents.
Sure.
And you know, there was a big hoopla over whether Victoria could come, and there were efforts to shut her down, but our Founding Freedoms Law Center had to jump in.
Yeah.
And they did successfully argue the free speech right for those students to have a speaker like Victoria representing their viewpoints. But now we find ourselves at this place where the school board, apparently that wasn't enough. They just can't stand the thought, apparently, of having counter opinions to their liberal dogma.
Yeah.
So they've pushed through this policy. They just recently voted on it that severely restricts the club activities.
Yeah, and it even kind of forces them to have any type of special speakers come about 45 minutes after school ends, which, you know, for students in school, you know, 45 minutes, they're ready to go home. And so they can really impact how they converse about certain important topics and have speakers and do what they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, you think about this club at one of its last meetings, I think it was Congressman McGuire, drew over half of the student body coming out to hear.
They're hungry to hear these topics and, you know, engage in dialogue.
Well, they know, I think they're very well aware that many students aren't going to be able to wait till almost an hour after the school day.
Yeah.
You know, and so I do think they just don't want competing messages to what they're trying, the propaganda, that they're trying to push.
Yeah, and I think that even those that may disagree with those viewpoints, and particular Victoria's, there were some that still showed up and were respectful and had conversations even afterwards, you know, after the meeting.
If it's over half the student body, you know, most of those probably don't share the conservative viewpoint. So they were there to hear and discuss and challenge different viewpoint. Apparently that's not welcome. But let's just listen to Victoria Cobb commenting on this right before the school board took its final vote on this.
This all started simply because they wanted to ban my talk, which was about two genders, one truth. When they allow gender sexuality clubs right down the hallway, we know that's about viewpoint. And ultimately, this school board has been aggressively pointing out that they don't agree with the viewpoint of this club. And so when we see things like that, that's where the problem comes in, is that they are clearly targeting this group. And the idea that a group could not fundraise to further their ends is really a question mark. These kids don't give up their First Amendment rights when they walk through the school doors. They can associate, they can have free speech. And so it's incredibly disappointing. And so what we're doing is making sure that the school board really understands the rights of these students and allows the free expression of ideas. We've had no no problem with the events. I finally was able to come after our law center had to remind the school board about the rights of these students. And I was able to come, and we had a very peaceful, civil dialogue. And that's what these kids have continued to have. And so there was no disruption. So the school board is naming things that didn't happen in order to try to pass a policy really on fast forward to prevent Erica Kirk from coming. So at the end of the day, when you allow kids to walk out the door for ICE walkouts, which the school did allow, that is disruption. When you allow a club to have a meeting during a set period of time and invite in a speaker to exchange ideas, that is not. And so we are really calling on the school board to call a spade and stop targeting kids with ideas that might not be theirs.
I love that point she made about the ICE walkout. I mean, it really is crazy because this whole time they've been trying to make these arguments around, well, we don't want to have disruptive elements, you know, and then they allow these walkouts over highly controversial things, and just it doesn't make logical sense.
Yeah, so you're disrupting the actual school day in this case, and then you're allowing them to go out into the street where things can happen. You know, someone could get hit by a vehicle,
and there have been things happen in some of the schools that have,
but. You know, we can't have someone who is, you know, has a certain viewpoint about a particular political issue come and speak to the student body. You can't do that.
Yeah.
I think it's just it's very hypocritical.
Yeah. Well, last week, our attorney, Josh Hetzler, again, he went back to advocate for students' free speech rights at the school board. And I just kind of want to talk about or go over some of the main points he made, because I think they're important for any Christian conservative clubs at high schools throughout Virginia. And he emphasized, you know, while the school district does have authority to set reasonable parameters for how student clubs function during the school day, it's not unlimited power.
Right. Yeah.
And he believes this policy really runs afoul of some important constitutional principles.
Yeah. And to your point, you're right. School boards have a responsibility to make sure that their schools are operating with, you know, has order. But they can't restrict a student's, you know, free speech ability to speak freely about certain topics. And this particular policy goes a little bit further, because it also talks about how if it's viewed by one person as harassing or hurtful
or hatred.
That's the word I was looking for, hatred. Those are terms that can be interpreted very broadly. And you know what's interesting? Out of all the organizations, we're talking about TPUSA, we're talking about an organization that was founded by Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated. An ultimate form of hatred, and yet these groups won't allow these school boards, or this particular school board won't allow these students to come in and have an assembly, a meeting where they can talk about important issues of the day.
Boy, that is such a key point, Todd. Yeah, and you know, one of the important points Josh was making, that it does seem like it was targeted, because this did happen right after this whole thing with Victoria Cobb, and it's kind of humorous. We keep talking about Victoria Cobb, you know, like she's some big, you know, controversial thing, but you and I know, we work with her every day. She's very winsome, and she was just invited to speak about the biological reality of gender, male and female, and somehow that's, you know, treated like this horrendous thing that's a huge threat. And, you know, I just want to mention your point about Charlie Kirk was assassinated. You know, and this whole thing is centering around if a person or a school official decides this club is espousing hatred. Well, right before she was invited or came out to speak, we had a school board member, at-large school board member, Allison Spillman, liken the Turning Point Club and Victoria's speech to the KKK. So we already know how they are going to define hatred.
Yeah, this is clearly viewpoint discrimination here, in that they know what the values and the principles are that someone like Victoria holds, and they just don't want that being spoken to these students. But yet they, on the other hand, can say anything they want, regardless of how radical and ridiculous it may be, of accusing the Turning Point USA of likening them to the KKK. I think you're really starting to get into a very problematic area here, where you are now creating policies to specifically try and go after a particular group This may apply broadly, but everyone knows exactly who this is targeting.
Yeah.
And that is a very shameful act on the part of the school board to be able to be doing this.
Yeah, well, they've done this, they're trying to act like it's neutral, but just the timing kind of tells you otherwise. But, I think what remains is to see how it's implemented. And if they do try to shut down the club with some ridiculous charge of hatred that's not founded, our legal team is there.
I think they will be looking forward to that, to be able to defend the free speech rights of these students. Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, this is going to have to play out a little bit.
Yeah.
But it is disturbing the way the policy's worded. It doesn't even just have to be that club. It could also be if someone deems their affiliated organization to be espousing hatred. And again, all you have to do is look at what school officials across the country and other people were saying about when Charlie was assassinated,
right?
To know where that could easily go.
Yeah, I mean, right here in Virginia, I mean, there was sort of at the beginning, if we look back to when it happened to Charlie Kirk, there was a general, okay, this was horrible. And then over time, sort of the feelings kind of settled a little bit. And even here in Virginia, the legislature came back, if some may recall, in the fall for a special session, and some resolutions came up to honor Charlie Kirk. And they were voted down or not even given an opportunity really to be heard. That's where we've gotten to this point now. We went from saying, yes, this is horrible, this shouldn't have happened, to now he espoused things that they did not agree with. And so now we're going to create policies at the local school level to shut them up.
Yeah, that's what it certainly looks like. And we'll see how this gets implemented. And, you mentioned across the board, I do think it's not just a concern for Turning Point, but also other Christian clubs. And,
sure.
I mean, this policy, I should specify, applies to non-curricular clubs.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
There's a lot of other clubs out there. There's Bible clubs. There's Fellowship of Christian Athletes, kind of, and if you're preventing any outside speakers, and making them go an hour before the school day or 45 minutes after school day or what, it's that pretty much makes it super hard for a lot of kids to participate.
Those are burdensome expectations for these clubs.
All right. Well, since we are on the topic of students' rights, I want to talk about another action our legal team's involved in. And, because it kind of connects with these students' free speech rights. And that is they have filed a legal brief on this case that many legal experts across the country are asking the Supreme Court to take a look at. And this involves another club, a pro-life student club out of Indiana. It's called the Noblesville Students for Life Club. And let me just tell you about this real quick. So they wanted to start a new pro-life club in their school, Noblesville School District in Indiana. And the club quickly garnered interest. There's a lot of interest, but when the students started trying to promote meetings, because when you're recognized as a student club, you can put up flyers and things in areas where you can make announcements. And the flyer, we're going to put a picture on the screen. It was a template because they're, I think, associated with the Students for Life. And so they used a template that had a place where they could put where they meet and a fun, happy-looking picture of some students at a Supreme Court rally.
Right.
And, these are, I think, your pretty bread and butter images of pro-life students.
Yeah.
So we're putting that, up here, and you can see that they have some pictures here of they're holding signs that says things like "I reject abortion," "Defund Planned Parenthood," "I am the pro-life generation."
Yeah. Very tasteful.
It's what they say. This apparently got their club shut down or de-recognized. This is apparently all it takes for them to be censored.
Yeah. Just because you're a school club doesn't mean that the school has to step in and shut you down because of your particular view on an issue like this. It does seem like it's really excessive. I mean, in looking at this flyer, I mean, it's tasteful. There's nothing egregious in here. There's no images that are that would kind of make someone, queasy. There's nothing like that.
They're all happy.
They're
I am
smiling.
a pro-life generation.
And they're students. They're showing that they can support a particular viewpoint that means something to them. And
Well, the thing that's disturbing about this, and I should explain, it's gone through several courts, and so now we're at the point. I think there was a Seventh Circuit. Which sided with the school, and so that's why people are now appealing to the Supreme Court. And our legal team was one of those that put in a brief why the Supreme Court should consider this, and it could, have of course a large impact on clubs like this across the nation.
Sure.
We see how student clubs are battling for free speech right here in our own state. Yeah. But I just want to mention a few points that I think are so important that our legal team made. What you were kind of alluding to, Todd, that student clubs don't lose their free speech rights just because they're on school property.
Right.
You constantly see these school officials trying to argue that because the students give some kind of expression that, someone might think the school is endorsing that. The court has ruled over and over again.
Yes, it has. Yeah, they made it very clear that you do not lose your rights the moment you walk or step onto school property, that you maintain those rights, and that's regardless of whatever the content is of that message.
Yeah. The students should be free to express their views unless the speech is actually disruptive. And clearly, I think we can all see from this poster that is not disruptive.
No.
The school, I think this is important, that it's not school. They can't treat student speech as school speech, or just because someone might misunderstand it. That's not, valid.
You have the ability to be able to say what you want to say, regardless if it's, even if it is controversial, even if it is going to stir up controversy. You have the ability to be able to do that. You can't restrict speech just on the basis that it's going to be controversial.
Well, if you're going to restrict speech on the basis of one person, the risk of one person being offended, we aren't going to have
everyone's going to be,
it
doesn't matter what it is. You're going to be offended.
There's just going to be one government opinion.
Sure, yes, yeah.
Well, I hope that they do take it up, because I think it is kind of scary where a lot of schools are trying to take this. It's very Orwellian. But let's go to the quick updates on session. Yeah, we'll keep you posted on these student battles. But session ended this past Saturday. Where are we at now?
Yeah, all right. So technically they ended. It's called Sine Die. It was on March 14th. Most of the bills they acted on. There were some that were left in conference committee. So that means if a bill came out with different versions from the House and the Senate, it goes to a conference where they have to work on it. Most of the bills came out. Some didn't. And I'm sure at some point we'll be talking about some of those updates down the road. But I think what everyone needs to know is they adjourned on Saturday, but they did so without a budget. And so now they're going to have to call a special session on April 23rd to take up the budget and any remaining bills that could be left in conference. But for our purposes right now, we have a little bit of a reprieve until April 22nd when they come back for reconvene.
I have a little bit of a
reprieve. Actually, it's really, no, that's not the case, because now bills that we don't, that either we want to see the governor veto or the governor sign or the governor amend, now is when we start to act and try and motivate her, and mobilize people to encourage her to take action, hopefully in a favorable way. Now,
so even though session ends and they're going to have the special session, she is still deciding which bills to sign or not sign off on, or veto, and she can take one of three actions. Sign it through, do nothing, it still goes through, or veto. Yeah. And is her deadline for that April 22nd? Is that how that works?
No, she has a deadline to act, and it depends on when the bill was passed.
Okay.
And I don't have that date in front of me, but it will be well before the veto reconvenes session. So she has to act on it. She reveals what her action is, whether veto, amend, and then the bill will come before the General Assembly when they come back into Richmond on April 22nd,
Okay.
And they take action.
And that's what's known as veto day.
Yeah, and it's only those that she's either vetoed or amended. That's what they're acting on. Any bills that she signs.
Because they can choose to override her veto.
They could. Now that would be pretty interesting to see something like that happen.
Probably not when they're all in agreement.
That's right.
Yeah.
And don't be mistaken. We don't anticipate there being a lot of vetoes that are in our favor, if any. But we'll do our part, and you might see some emails come out on this.
Well, this time around April is all very key because a lot of you will remember that the redistricting, the last day of voting at the ballot, or I shouldn't say last day of voting because I don't know how they handle the crazy way they handle voting now, but it's in the ballot box.
Yeah. So
until April 21st.
Early voting started on March 6th for the redistricting amendment, and so you have until April 21st to vote. That's the last day that you can vote.
Okay, we can't say that's the last day.
That is the last day.
Okay, and then the very next day, April 22nd, is both veto day because all of the legislators will be back to consider action on what Abigail Spanberger has done. It's both veto day and the March for Life because Virginia March for Life, because we want to have a wonderful showing for life on the day we know all the legislators are back in, and we'll get to that in a moment. Yeah. But I want to just get your quick take on a couple of things that I know our audience was concerned about.
Okay.
Of course, one of those that pro-lifers were closely watching was the proposed FACE Act. Tell us where that's at.
Yeah, so this is a bill. It's Senate Bill 137. It was carried by Senator Pekarsky from Fairfax.
Okay.
She actually was taking the bill over this year. Last year, it was carried by Senator Surville from the same area, interestingly. And she brought it they both brought it because they said that there was a group that were interfering with women who were going into an abortion facility to consult, have an abortion, whatever they were seeking to do in there. And so they didn't think that was right. So they wanted to bring a bill that would prohibit any type of obstruction. Now, what this bill does is kind of aligned with what you see at the federal level. That's why we call it the Virginia FACE Act. It's modeled after the federal FACE Act, as well as some other states. And this bill would essentially say that if you intentionally interfere with a mother who is going into an abortion facility for consultation or any type of reproductive, as they say, reproductive services, which would include abortions, then you could be faced with some penalties, including a Class 1 misdemeanor, which is up to 12 months in jail and a monetary penalty.
To give people context real quick, this is the federal version of this is the same thing that was weaponized against pro-lifers, trying to throw them into prison.
That's right.
And we had a friend here in Virginia that faced that, Denny Green, Denny Green and others got a pardon from President Trump, so that just to give you context, there, instead of we're going the opposite direction in our General Assembly, trying to push, in Virginia to have this. So that's kind of the national context there.
Yeah, the bill is very concerning. There's some language in there. Interfere means restricting someone's freedom of movement.
Yeah. Let's put this up on the screen for people.
Okay.
We're going to put the actual wording on here. And I want to mention there was disagreement in the camp with I guess Democrats on these two versions.
Yeah, you had the introduced version, which came out. It was somewhat similar to what we see here.
Okay.
And it did come out of the Senate. The House, when it came over to the House and it went into the Courts of Justice Committee, the House actually added a lot more to it. They created almost like a tiered system in which if you interfered or did something obstructed at one level, then it was a penalty, and if you had multiple cases where you've been doing it, then it was the fines and the penalties increased. And there was a little bit, some of the same language regarding the freedom of movement that was included in there, but they were at odds over this, and we were trying to figure out exactly why one group was favoring the Senate version while others were favoring the House version, because it seemed like Planned Parenthood and some of your abortion industry supported the Senate version while the ACLU stepped in to kind of give their support for the House version.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so probably one side wanted more draconian, and maybe the LCU's looking at what's going to survive a court challenge.
That's probably right.
Yeah, so here's what we ended up with. So what would you highlight as far as these words about intimidate?
Yeah.
And there's wording in here about physical obstruction.
Yeah. And well, first of all, I mean, you're talking about there's an intent, but it could be necessarily, unnecessarily. So if you in any way kind of interfere with their ability to access the facility, then intentionally, then you would be in violation of this law.
Okay.
That, in essence, is going to have a chilling effect on those who want to simply be near there to provide literature to a mother to help them know about alternatives, help them know about counseling that is not at this abortion facility.
Or even just create the opportunity for a conversation or a prayer.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at this wording about physical obstruction, and it says things that make passage to the abortion clinic, quote, unreasonably or unnecessarily difficult. And that unnecessarily difficult could be kind of a legal gray area.
That is. And I think our legal team is going to look at that and kind of figure out what exactly the implications are of that. Because you're right. What is unnecessarily? How do you interpret that? How do you, those are the things that a court's going to have to weigh when if a case is brought, if there is a complaint, then they're going to have to interpret this and decide what is necessary and what's not necessary.
Well, it's not as horrible as maybe some of the earlier versions, which I want to encourage people. That's why it's important to have your pro-life voices out there, your free speech voices that they're hearing from, and also, that we continue defending constitutional principles. But I like you said, this is going to create a chilling effect because people don't know.
Sure.
Like if I try to have a conversation with someone, are they going to say they were unnecessarily physically intimidated or obstructed?
Yeah. If you pass in front of them, accidentally, is that? But I want to point out that one thing that I'm finding very clearly, this is directed at those who are outside of abortion facilities. And it talks in there about not damaging or causing harm to the actual facilities and those brick and mortar places. And I find that so disturbing because what we've seen across the country and right here in Virginia is pregnancy resource centers that have been firebombed since Dobbs, that have been harassed, that have graffiti, that have all kinds of damage to their actual facilities. And I wanted to point out that, I don't know of any list out there. Anyway, I'm talking about a long list of places, pregnancy resource centers across the country.
And
I don't know of any.
Catholic churches, too.
Yes. And I don't know of any abortion facilities that have experienced the same sort of, attacks.
Regularly
occurring. Now, I'm not saying it's never happened, but I find it very troubling that we have a legislature clearly going after one side, but not providing the same sort of protections for pregnancy resource centers who should receive it.
This is where you just see this kind of viewpoint bias or blindness, just purposeful, even tone deafness, because, it is maddening when you see this wording about don't intimidate, physically obstruct, and there's been that exact effort to even physically harm these pregnancy resource centers and intimidate them. I mean, could we be more?
It was interesting. It was interesting during the legislative debates earlier in session when the patron brought the bill and was presenting the bill, and it was time for supporters, people in support, people in oppose, to come up and speak. Not one person got up and supported the bill, at least in the very first committee. Now, Planned Parenthood and some other groups did eventually come along that way, but there was no one outside of those two lobbying efforts. There was no people from the public coming out saying that this happened to me. There was nobody. And so it just seems like it's just a bill by anecdote, that we have created a scenario, a storyline here, and we're going to build a piece of legislation around that.
Yeah, kind of reminds me what's happening in Albemarle, where there's no disruption except for maybe
right.
what they've created with ice walkouts.
Yeah.
And yet we're creating policy around that.
That's right.
Well, Todd, I want to have you on again for next week to talk about some other things like marijuana, when that's hitting us and everything. So, we'll talk next week about wins, losses, some of the outcomes of these things that we're concerned about. So I did want to talk about, again, just remind everyone that Veto Day, April 22nd, is the same day as March for Life. Please mark your calendar for that. It's such a key day for you to come out and be a part of this visual demonstration for life. This is the most important march that we've ever had in the state and possibly ever will be. So in that context, I just want to briefly mention a poll that, I'm sorry to have to bring this up, but it's showing some pretty disturbing information on church members, on the people sitting next to us in our pews. A lot of them are just not with us on, the importance of protecting human life on every stage, at every stage of life, whether it's in the womb. And we know this because there's been this national study directed by George Barna and David Clausen, director of the Center for Biblical Worldview over at the Family Research Council. And here's what it showed that was really disturbing, that regular churchgoers identifying as pro-life really just plummeted from 63% in 2025 to 43% in 2025. So something is wrong. I'm just going to put this social media post, that ask a very good question. Whatever we're doing right now to try to talk to people, especially younger people and families in our churches, we need to look at that in many ways it's not working. We need to be asking ourselves some questions. The other disturbing thing, Todd, is that this actually matches the percentage of pro-life people that are identifying as pro-life in the general population. So what the disturbing thing that tells us is that there's really not any significant difference or correlation between regular church attendance and the likelihood of being pro-life. I mean, that if you're regularly attending church, you should be hearing a biblical worldview, and that should
be
result in a different response to the survey.
Yeah, I think that two thoughts on this. I think the first one, and you certainly don't want to place all the blame on pastors. You want to be careful not to be overly critical, but clearly there is a lack of information that's being provided from the pulpit on these biblical issues. And I think a lot of times pastors step back and say, wait a minute, this is a political issue, and I cannot speak from it from the pulpit because I may alienate people from my church. Of course, we would respond, but then Genesis 1:27, God created us, male and female, we're made in His image. And so I think that we have a responsibility in the churches to be able to talk about these issues, talk about the importance of life and what it means. I think the second part of that is clearly these families are being inundated with a worldview from schools, from culture that promotes a lack of respect for the sanctity of life. And if you're getting it from that side, and then you're having the leadership in the church not speak to it from the pulpit, you have a vacuum where there's nobody that's helping these families understand the importance of this issue.
Right. And what happens in a lot of churches is that they might make a sanctity of life, Sunday announcement or talk about God's heart for life. But people in the pews, we see right here that so many people in the pews are not connecting that dot to actual state policy. Yeah. That puts the life in the womb in danger, pretty much up until birth here in Virginia. Yeah. So they're not, they don't necessarily connect those dots. And then we're about to have this abortion amendment that's going to the ballot in November that will enshrine unlimited abortion. But even more, in addition to that, it will eradicate parental rights because they've set up the legal groundwork with the wording into the abortion amendment. We won't go into all that right now. But also they have this shield language that makes it really hard for women to get justice if they have a botched abortion or an abortion pill goes wrong.
And
they
it
don't-
doesn't provide real protections for mothers, So if they go in and something happens, there's no safeguards within this amendment.
Or it makes it hard for them to hold
makes
accountable.
It hard. It makes it very hard. So then that's why when you have these shield laws, that only compounds what the real impact will be from this.
Well, I agree with you. The two challenges here are, I think, maybe the lack of connecting the dots with pastors, not enough pastors saying more, but also the culture message is self-autonomy is a higher value than the value of human life.
Yeah.
And so I think we're running into those two things, and people in the pews, apparently they're not getting the discipleship and the help that they could use to sort all that out.
Yeah, and then you throw in the fact that you're going to have mothers and grandmothers there that they care and love for their children, and if their daughter does experience an unplanned pregnancy, then they're thinking, well, what do I do for them? And so maybe their views are maybe changing. So it's all tied together. You have a message about life coming from the pulpit. You have the people in the church that are hearing that message, that are able to learn from that and then be able to instruct their children on how to live a life that is pure, devoted to God, and that you can avoid these situations. Wait until marriage. Wait until then before you have children.
Yeah, and that reminds me, the same study found that 20% of regular churchgoers, listen to this, 20% of regular churchgoers had paid for, encouraged, or chosen to have an abortion. And that gets to your point of people sitting in the pews, having to make decisions, a friend, a daughter, and I think it's clear they need more tools to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, a pastor shouldn't take silence in the pews as a sign that it's not affecting them. It is. It just may not be vocalized to them.
Well, let me give you some good news here that if you're listening to this, we have a pastor packet. If you go to familyfoundation.org, that's familyfoundation.org, you'll see the March for Life banner there. Click that. You scroll down, you'll see a pastor packet. This Virginia March for Life is a great opportunity for pastors to bring this up and just invite people to join together to articulate, just in an easy way, visually demonstrate God's love for life. If they all go to this march, and we have buses in a lot of communities through our Speak Up teams that will take people to this march, not only will they be inspired with speakers, they'll get to join together, have a joyous, loving march around the Capitol, but we're having training. This is new this year.
This is great. All right.
They're going to get talking points on how to articulate a view for life, especially to equip people in their own communities on this abortion amendment that's going to be on the ballot in November. So we really need to get people out there.
So is this like a March for Life party bus? Can they kind
there
of
is
think of
singing
it
on
that
the
way?
bus. Yeah.
Yeah. They have fun. You get to hang out with people, fellowship.
Yeah.
Someone will bring snacks, I bet.
Yeah.
It's fun.
All right. Todd did a great little pitch for this. If you want to know about all of these things, getting your pastor packet so you can hand that to your pastor, how to get on a bus, training, how to sign up for the training, because we are going to have free box lunches for the training. So basically you're going to have 10 a.m., meet close to the bell tower for a rally, then do the march around 11, and then at 12:30 training starts. Get all that information. Again, go to familyfoundation.org, click on the March for Life banner. So I guess that's about a wrap for this week.
All right. That was fun.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it.
You'll be back next week.
I'll be back. Yeah.
Tell you the wins, losses, and any other breaking news.
Yeah. We'll have a much longer list of bills that we can update everybody on.
Well, don't scare people.
Not too long.
Not too long. All right. We'll see you next time. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together. Don't forget to share or give us a comment on the YouTube or the Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening. We love to get your comments and questions. We'll see you next time.